I'm hopeful, but I'm always skeptical. And I think now is a time, and I think in history you always get certain times where there's like a fever pitch and the mood for change is there. And that's what we have right now. We have a situation where the iron's hot. That doesn't mean people are gonna strike it. That doesn't mean we're gonna form it. Now is a time where I am hopeful that there's an opportunity, but what we do with that opportunity, I think that's gonna be what I'm looking at.
I've read a lot of headlines from Black writers and Black producers of podcasts and Black journalists who are basically like, why is this time different? Like, why does this feel different? Why are all these white people all of a sudden ready to go out into the streets? Why do they purport to care so much that they're like basically buying out all of the anti-racism books? And I have to say that I'm kind of asking that same question too. Like, what makes this feel different than Ferguson or Flint or Baltimore and Freddie Gray? Like, these were all within our recent history. And to the previous question, why wasn't I engaged with those? Why wasn't I out protesting? I went out for March for Life. I went to the Women's March. Why didn't I go out for these other protests that were protesting the killing of Black men and women? And I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer, but what I do feel is true is that this time, for any number of factors that have been brought up, does feel different and people feel activated. So what do I see differently is I see some of my white friends who were very silent and very hands-off in these issues before. I see them wanting not only to engage in a conversation, but also to learn. They want to ask themselves these questions. How have I perpetuated this in ways that I was unaware of? How can I learn how to show up, be better, and not be silent? And I'm seeing this from my white friends in ways that I've never seen before. And I don't know the why. I just know that I'm seeing that.
I think things can change, man. I think one of the things I keep trying to tell myself is, how do I have a long view in this? You know, like, I think that one of the things I've been impressed with, I think there's more people who are actually in the fight now. But one of the things I'm realizing is, for the people, do your work, right? Do your work to know how you can grow, right? I can tell you what books to read, who to follow, what institutions to go out and support. Like, there's a lot of that information you can just Google. You can literally Google how to be an anti-racist or how to fight for racial justice. Like, I can fill your head, right? But I can also tell you organizations to join. I can literally like give you boots on the ground that you can go join in. There's marches all over the place, right? We can do that too. But I think for the mass of people, for us to get real change and sustainable change, we got to actually do some hard work.
To me, the biggest thing that has stuck out is that I hear a lot of people saying, well, it's a good start. Well, this initiative, this event, this conversation on racism is a great start. False. We have been having these conversations, and whoever is saying those things probably has had those same events in years past. But now, because that's all they've known to ever do, they're just repeating it and calling it a start. I need for every single person, especially white people, to be more, to acknowledge at a higher degree the fact that they started by not starting. Like, don't look at this period of time as some new revelation. No, nothing. It was one person's death. That was one man. George Floyd was one man. So to simplify or pacify the conversation by saying that we're starting here, starting today, it's disrespectful.
And I'll be honest with you, my kids, they gonna have to endure this racist system, you know, because it's not, you know, when you look at our government, there's been a lot of conservative judges over 200 put in place, and they'll be there for a few years. So these are some of the principles that I instill in my kids, is that you have to have a high level of self-love, because there's gonna be a lot of people in situations that's gonna try to take from out of your, you know, from your cup. And you just it gotta be overflowing with that power. You know, you have to have the power of self, you have to know who you are, you have to know what your heritage is, and understand that regardless of how the predominant race of people may view you, or how they may put obstacles in your path. You have the power to overcome all of that. I didn't understand the power of the judicial branch of government until, I'll be honest, 15 years ago. And I understand the power of that, of how to vote and and researching and evaluating the people you put in these political positions at the local level, and how important that is, and how that affects your day-to-day life. I understand that now, but 18, 19, I didn't.
I think that if we're going to make some change, it's actually going to have to start at the grassroots level. That people on the ground, in their communities, not first in terms of who we're going to vote for president. Yes, that matters. I vote. We got to do that. But we got to do the grassroots work in our own communities. We got to be pulling people together. We got to be organizing. We got to be linking arms with folks. We got to be bridging, making coalitions of groups together who recognize that all of our well-being is bound up in one another, and that if we're going to flourish, all of us need to flourish together. And this won't be short-term work. This will be work that will demand that we're in it for the long haul. And so that's the kind of work that I think that we've got to get committed to. Right now, we're so locked into our partisan politics in such a way that the platforms actually decide for us what matters to us. We allow donors basically to tell parties to tell us what our platform is going to be, rather than us going and hearing the needs of our neighbors and folks that we care about, and starting from there on the ground and saying, these are the issues that are hurting us most. We do the work, we do the research, and then we organize, and we go and with power, right? Not centralized top-down power, but decentralized power of the people, literally going back and saying, this is what matters. These are the issues that are impacting us.
I think one thing that's really important is, when you think about change, you need to have a picture of what change should look like. The big picture. What are you shooting for? Not just what are you against, but what are you shooting for? What do you want to be for and be about? And then, simultaneously, what are the immediate steps to make change happen, practically, tactically, strategically? I think it's really important to recognize we don't all have the same big picture. We don't all have the same understanding of what we're shooting for. And so, collectively, it would be really helpful for all of us to start talking about what is the good life, the democratic society, the kind of free and equal world look like to you? Because it looks differently for people. We don't all just know that. For me, it's a world that is forgiving. It's a world that is peaceful, that is humanizing, and it's also a world of diversity and difference. And so it's not just this kumbaya, let's just all get along and everything's great. It's a place where we are different and we may disagree, but we do that in a very respectful, dignifying way, which makes us more human and the people we disagree with more human. It looks out for the best of us. It gives the best, kind of the benefit of the doubt to those who we don't know.
It's the little things that you do, right? It's me walking down the street at night and I see a white lady walking her dog, she immediately goes across the street. Or the fact that I have to take my hoodie off when it's cold outside at night and I'm walking back from Turkey Hill, but I know me walking my gray hoodie or black hoodie, I have to take it off because I don't want to scare anybody. The little things that we have to go through, the realities, or the side looks when you have your friends over, or you playing music in your car and everybody's giving you the look of, what are you doing here? Or you have a family get-together and people are coming over and somebody's complaining. Oh, but when they have families over, nobody says anything. It's those little things of people reminding you that you don't belong here. So, what we need to do is call those little things out and stop doing it. We need the majority, again, the white communities who are where these people of color trying to live in certain communities that are majority, they're the minority in. We need the majorities in those communities to call that out, to have those conversations, and go out of their way to make the people of color feel comfortable. Because only so much we can do. Me just being here, living in a community surrounded by those who don't look like me, I'm just trying to make sure I don't fit the description. I'm just trying to make sure I keep it moving. I'm nice to everybody where people have a good relationship with me, but that doesn't change how you perceive me. So what we need to do is have the majority of the people in those areas talk to each other. Hey, this is wrong. You don't do that. That's wrong. You don't make those comments. Because I know if roles were reversed, it wouldn't feel so good. It wouldn't feel so good at all. Treat other people the same way you want to be treated.
There's joy in justice. And there's justice in joy, too. And being hopeful and joyful that there is a better community in the future that I'm working towards now, and that there are better outcomes for everyone in the community, particular folks who are under a lot of duress, particularly our marginalized communities, and those who are on the margins of the margins, like Black trans men and women, for example, that there is a better community ahead. But we have to do the work now. We have to do the work now. And that work includes trying to bolster community relations through discussion, absolutely, but also just calling those things like they are, and making sure that we employ, or I don't know what word I'm thinking of, but bring along as many people of the dominant culture as possible who are truly about the work too. Because as I've told so many people, yes, of course, well, you don't want any white people in here? No, we absolutely need white people everywhere, obviously, because we cannot end systemic racism without white folks. We cannot end discrimination of any kind without every part of the community involved in that work. And to go a step further, having people who inherit a system of racism and systemic racism, who inherit structural benefits from that system, it's on them to do the work to dismantle that system. Like, that's the work.
The action I can take from the listening and the learning is to address some of those implicit biases or those thoughts when they're going on in my head, when I'm like, whoa, that actually, what you just said right there, thank God it's in your head, because it was pretty racist, and having those moments now, like, right there, so I can change it right then and there, and when somebody else is doing it, I can change it right then and there. I'm definitely feeling more hopeful, not only because there are more conversations around it and more white people are talking about it and actually doing work and taking courses and trying to, if they're parents, they're trying to raise their kids to be less racist. I'm having conversations with my parents about the stuff and the policies that were in place, from like Nixon to Clinton, like all of the things that they were alive for. So there's more conversation, which makes me hopeful. And there's like, this is gonna sound a little out there, but like the energy behind what's going on right now, it's like we're all resonating at the same level where we're going, this is not okay. We're all finally on the same playing field and saying like, this is not okay, we need to change it. I can't tell my friend to be more hopeful, that's not my place. I can't tell other people to be more hopeful, but I can be more hopeful, and I can act on that hope and sort of lead the way. And I really do I feel like it's different just by the energy that's behind it and what I'm hearing from other people and from what happened in 2015 of, protests in Ferguson and Baltimore and all of that. I'm just more present for it now, which I think is the difference that gives me hope too. I think everybody's present to the shifts that are happening and like unweaving the systems of oppression and just kind of going for it. And, we're in an election year where hopefully people are getting put into place who will make those changes as well. And people like me can support the movements that are already in place that we didn't know about until this moment.
I feel like race and things like that probably should be talked about in the workplace. It should be mandatory. I mean, as far as with this transition that is building to something good, I'm hoping that would also help. There should be a handbook to say that we're not tolerating this, and this, and for the manager to be upheld to that. And it should be in the handbook so that all the employees can have it, so that they can hold their managers accountable.
We need to rethink systems. We need to have hard conversations about what are the values that we have for these particular systems, whether they're education, whether they're police, whether they're healthcare, government. And we need to start to dismantle places where we find oppression in the way those systems work. If they're not serving people, how do we make them better? And I'm not just talking about in America. This good life, this good world, this good picture, this dream, it's for all people. It's not just for Americans. So that means we have to have some long, hard conversations about what does it mean to be an American and still dignify our brothers and sisters around the world.
We're looking for integrated changes, like systemic changes. We're looking for new legislation. We're looking for new positions, new diversity positions in companies that didn't have one before. We're looking for more white people to talk about blackness in America at the dinner table, at home with their kids. We're looking for black parents, black mothers to attend African American festivals, to go to the African American museums. We're asking for white fathers to, spend more time in the schools, volunteering on the teams.
Companies are going to follow the dollar, right? Companies now know, right? Why are all these companies following this trend now? Part of it is because maybe they had some soul searching and value. Part of it is they saw that Nike stock went up because they supported Colin Kaepernick before the rest of the companies did, right? So you do see a movement in different people in different spaces. So I'm hopeful that as people see the potential value by respecting Black lives, hopefully that sticks. And if we keep getting more informed and we move towards a more knowledgeable populace, we can change things, and the climate is ready for change.
Two things locally that we're trying to work on is a police review board, a Harrisburg Bureau Police Review Board. And then we're also trying to work on initiatives on how we interact with the police as a community. So trying to hit that from both ends. That's something I think will not just be a reactive solution to what's happening around the country, but a proactive solution going forward. And then a couple other things we're doing is just doing leadership workshops, particularly the YPOC. We're just doing leadership workshops on how people can get involved in the community. So the number one question we've had on our inbox, messages, my personal email, our YPOC email, my work email, every way that folks can contact us is, what can I do? And most of the questions are coming from folks of the dominant culture. What can I do? What can I do? And so, part of what we believe our work is to identify those initiatives and say, here's what you can do. Here's what you can do to help. Here's what you can do in the community. Here's how you interact with community organizations. Here's how you can fund them. Here's how you can do these things so that you're affecting positively, not just reacting when a Black or brown life is murdered, right? But because their lives should not only matter in death. Black life matters from the beginning all the way through to the end. So let's attack some of the systemic and community issues we're seeing at those levels too.
When you are intertwined with people, walking with people who love you and you love them, like their concerns, their struggles become things that you're just way more invested in, right? So I think that's one of the things for the masses, right? Like, we have a lot of information going out that's filling people's head, which is great because we're Western, right? We have a lot of information, which is, especially in this area, getting people on the ground, which is great because we're practical people, but we can't lose the heart. We can't lose the relationship. The second thing I think that's really, really important in all this too, though, is to realize that this has to be a sustainable moment, right? There's got to be more voices fighting on different lines, right? So there's a lot of people right now who are for the first time asking, well, how does our police department spend money? What is the accountability? And I think part of the work is figuring out what groups are already on the ground doing this work. Don't assume, right? So I think a lot of times people assume that we in our communities aren't fighting these fights, or we in our community aren't doing these things. So I think find out who's doing what and go jump in. I think that's important. But then just realize that this is a long, long road. You're gonna need perseverance, but you're gonna need people who love you, who value you. And I think maybe the third thing is, find voices that challenge you. Right? So it's not just this existential exercise or this academic exercise of I identify this, so I'm going to find someone on the polar opposite, right? No, find people who don't just challenge you, but people who are going to grow you. And I think there's a lot of really, really good that can happen out of all this. On my most hopeful days, I see this as a watershed moment. on every other day, which is every day that ends in day, I say this is still America, and this is still a system that, we just changed the tool of racism. Like every couple of years, we just changed the primary vehicle, right? So I think we need to be mindful of what does hope look like. So even when we ask that question, like, what makes you hopeful? For me, it's honestly relationships. Like if people get in relationship with each other, then I think they're going to be more willing to fight for one another. I think there's a lot of really cool institutions doing good work, but if I'm not in relationship with those people on the ground, right, it's going to be a $30 donation and I'm good, right? Or it's going to be like, I marched, so I'm good. I got my check mark. So yeah, so I would say be in relationship, challenge yourself to grow, face the history, and realize that, I think King was right on this too. Like there's another America, right? There's an America that you may not necessarily see or understand, but that people live. And how do we not just elevate those experiences, but also realize that that's the reality of America too? And then how do we fight to change some of that?